Today I'm going to be sharing another Christmas story from the book, True Christmas Stories from the Heart of Appalachia. It was compiled and edited by James M. Gifford, Judith F. Kidwell, and Wayne Oxt. It's just full of really wonderful Christmas stories. This one is from 1950, The Extra Gift, and it was written by Clyde Pack. Colorful Christmas lights with little bubbles were strung around the entrance of the H.S. House Community School, sitting majestically atop a little knoll overlooking Yankee Stadium. Well, actually, it was really the schoolhouse bottom, but since it was the only place flat enough for a baseball diamond within walking distance, we called it Yankee Stadium. The school was the largest building in the camp, with 4 large classrooms, an auditorium, and indoor plumbing in the basement. It was a state-of-the-art educational facility for the time. Matter of fact, had it had a tower with a fair damsel in distress, it would have sort of reminded me of one of those big castles I'd seen in the movies. And when the backwater from the Lavisa Fork of the Big Sandy River would creep onto our ball field, it appeared to even have a moat. That imposing structure was where I, as well as my 6 siblings, struggled for 8 years with long division and cursive writing. But during one Christmas season, nearly 70 years ago, I learned something else that may have proven even more valuable. As a coal camp kid, enjoying my 5th grade year at the Muddy Branch School in 1950, the Christmas season pretty much dominated my thoughts. There was little or no concern as to what was going on in the rest of the world. I couldn't have cared less what President Truman was doing in Washington, D.C., or that gas had risen to 18 cents a gallon. I'd heard a lot on the radio when Mom and Dad listened to Gabriel Heater and the news about something they called the Great Brinks Robbery, whatever that meant, but preferred watching Howdy Doody in the afternoons on our neighbor's little 12-inch black and white TV. And just like the rest of my classmates, as the big day approached, I was not aware of the fact that, at least in some circles, we were considered poor. Matter of fact, if LBJ and Lady Bird had not stood on the steps of our county courthouse and declared war on our poverty in the early 1960s, some of us may never have given it a thought. But as far as I knew, in 1950, everybody in the community and everywhere else lived like I did. The head of the house worked for the coal company, and everybody lived in a snug little company house with no running water. We never went to bed hungry nor cold, and every family had several children. Things were pretty much even Steven in that regard. Well, not quite everybody. One particular exception was a family of 5 children, ages from about 2 through 10, who, as Mom put it, didn't have a daddy. I was old enough to know that was not possible, but I also knew that Mom had expressed it that way because she didn't want me to know where the daddy really was, nor why he wasn't there. But I already knew all about moonshine and stuff like that. Now, the local church, in this case the Thielke Free Will Baptist Church, was big on benevolence, especially during the holiday seasons, and since Dad was one of the deacons, this particular Christmas season it fell upon him to deliver food baskets to those the congregation felt were in need. Not surprisingly, the aforementioned family that didn't have a daddy was struggling financially and needed assistance. When Mom learned his destination that snowy Saturday morning to accompany the basket of food, she handed him a large brown paper sack full of old clothes that my little brother and I had outgrown. Among the apparel was a blue pullover sweater with white reindeer walking around the chest area that Mom had ordered a couple of winters back from Montgomery Ward. I had worn it only on special occasions, like to church or town, but now it was too small for me and too big for my little brother. Mom had washed it and done it up real nice, and since I'd been real careful with it, it was practically as good as new, except for a little snag on the right elbow I'd gotten when I caught it on a neighbor's barbed wire fence when I'd cut through his garden late one Sunday afternoon when I was looking for our cow. I gave no thought to any of this until the following Friday, the day school dismissed for the holiday, with a big party in every room. By a big party, I mean one that included Kool-Aid and homemade cookies and brightly colored presents stacked under a spindly, construction paper decorated Christmas tree that sat over in the corner in an 8-pound lard bucket. The presents, of course, were placed there by students who had drawn names. I had not bothered to seek out mine because I already knew what I'd get. I always got a box of chocolate-covered cherries, which I knew I'd never get to eat because I sat in the back of the room. The teacher handed out the gifts by calling the recipient's name and handing the gift to the student sitting at the first desk in that particular row, who would hand it to whoever was behind him. That continued until the gift got back to the person whose name she'd called. By the time my present got back to me, all that would be left was a box full of little brown paper cups. The oldest child of the fatherless family was a girl, and she was in my room. Her name was Roberta Fay. Almost every kid at the Muddy Branch School went home for lunch, and when the bell rang to take up school for the afternoon and party time, we all rushed to the cloakroom to hang up our coats and caps. As I came out, I saw Roberta Fay literally beaming and smiling from ear to ear, proudly wearing and showing off to her girlfriends her brand new blue sweater with the white reindeer walking around the chest area. I think I was the only one who noticed the little snag on the right elbow. I was probably the only one, too, who received 2 gifts that day. It was 1950. I was in the 5th grade. What a sweet little story about giving. And really, he didn't have anything to do with giving the sweater, and like he said, never even thought a thing about it after that until that moment in the classroom when he saw how happy Roberta was to have it. And something obviously that stuck with him. He learned an important lesson that day. Something that he didn't want anymore was something somebody else did want. I've been sharing those words of wisdom from people, and in the past few months or several weeks since I've been doing that, someone left one that was like, I'll get it wrong, I know, but the gist of it is that we need to remember that what we take for granted is what someone else is praying for, basically. So that's a good example of that, something that he just took for granted for, and that was a shirt he no longer needed, and he wasn't concerned about it, and then it turned out to be exactly what just, pleased the little girl and made her whole Christmas, I'm sure. I enjoyed this part, the very beginning of it, when he talks about, I like how they called their baseball field Yankee Stadium. And I don't know if you're like me, but the first time I read that, I was thinking, Yankee Stadium, wait a minute, this is about Appalachia. But then he says, of course, that he was just joking. That's just what they called it. It reminds me of one time in college, I had a teacher. It's the first time I'd ever had him, professor, in a computer class, and he was introducing himself and talking and kind of going over what we would talk about in the class. This was like the first day, of the semester. And then he said that he wanted to, he'd tell a little bit about himself, that he's from L.A., and I was thinking, you're not from L.A., you sound just like me. I'm trying to compute all that in my head. But then he said, I'm from Lower Andrews. So he was from right here in Cherokee County, just like I knew by how he talked. But he said, I'm from L.A., and I was thinking, you don't sound like somebody from California. But he said he was from Lower Andrews. So I like that they called the ball field Yankee Stadium. I thought that was real sweet and real kind of colorful way of living your life there. I like that a lot. And then the bliss of him being a kid, him talking about he didn't know what President Truman was doing, and he sure didn't care. That is one of the things, of course, you don't realize that when you're a child, but once you get to be an adult, you realize, those days of not knowing and not caring what anybody is, only your little circle of world, that you worried about. You didn't have to worry about what was happening overseas. You didn't have to worry about what the president was or wasn't doing, and you didn't have to worry about none of those big serious things that the grown-ups whispered about. When Corey and Katie were growing up, and they would often wish, just like I did, to be an adult. So you could do whatever you wanted to do. If you think that when you're young, that when I get to be an adult, things will be different. Of course, when you get to be an adult, you realize, no, you don't do whatever you want to do. You're bound by responsibility and laws and all those kind of things, that you have to be beholden to if you live a good life. But we would tell them, someday you're going to wish that all you had to worry about was your homework and your chores around the house, and all that was all you had to worry about. Someday you'll remember that. You'll remember us telling you that. And they've both told us over the years, Katie and Corey both, was like, man, y'all were so right. You were so right. And when all we had to do was worry about doing homework, and that was our chores around the house, and that was our only responsibility. Now, of course, being adults, you got bills, and you both got children now, and all those kind of things. And I said, I know, but I said, Pap told me the same thing, and I didn't believe him either till I got to be an adult. So that's just the way of being a child. But I really love that what his focus was on was just, watching Howdy Doody and enjoying, and that's just the bliss of being a child. And I wish that for all children. I know some children have hard lives and tough lives, and at a real early age. And maybe Roberta's was like that. They're having to think about where the food's going to come from, and why Daddy didn't come home, or where Mama's at, and all that. So it breaks my heart for them. I wish everyone could live that kind of childhood where they didn't worry about nothing except what was in their little family and their little school and their little daily life, and they didn't have to worry about the big heavy stuff. And I love, kind of to play off of that, at the end, he had a glimpse of that. He got a glimpse, and I'm sure as he got older, he learned even more. He was only in 5th grade. But even then, he got a glimpse of that, about how everybody's not like my family. Some people have it really hard and really tough, and to the point that Roberta was really happy. She was so happy because she got his old sweater. And I'm sure that helped shape his life. Probably other things too, but that was one little inkling there of him. And I'm so glad he wrote it, aren't you? So glad that he wrote that so that we could share it today and think about it and ponder about those things. And yes, the joy of Christmas, but also the sadness for people that don't have the same things that we do, and that have tough, rough patches of life. I've had rough patches of life, but my rough patches have been very small, and then I was back on the pavement. So I really feel for people that struggle, and I pray for them, and I know you do too. Hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you'll come back next Friday and listen to another Christmas story. I appreciate all of you, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas.